Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm Marcel Wieder. We're coming to you from our new home in downtown Toronto. It's a new year and we have some exciting news to share. Starting February 11th at 7 p.m., you can watch The Point on Rogers Television Network, Channel 10 and 510 in HD. We'll be expanding our lineup of guests to include some of Ontario's biggest decision makers, and we'll continue to look behind the issues and players that shape things locally, provincially, and nationally. Today, we have Patrick Dillon of the Provincial Building and Construction Trade Council of Ontario. He's here to discuss the spate of industrial deaths in Toronto and across the province. Craig Hughson from Aurora Strategy Group joins us to chat about federal-provincial relations and the upcoming February 5th by-election taking place in Sudbury. All that and more on this edition of The Point. Welcome back to The Point. I'm Marcel Wieder. During the holiday break, there's been a lot of activity politically. It's been a year in the making, but Premier Wynne finally got her meeting with Prime Minister Harper. In Sudbury, campaigns are kicking into high gear for the February 5th by-election. And a sharp drop in oil prices has finance ministers rejigging their budgets. Joining me to discuss this and more is Craig Hughson from Aurora Strategy Group. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thanks, Marcel. Good to be back.
Over the holidays, there's been a little bit of Christmas goodwill when Prime Minister Harper met with Premier Wynne just before the Canada-Russia gold medal game. It's been a year in the making. The Premier has written a number of letters and has been very public in trying to get the Prime Minister's attention. So what happened at that meeting before the gold medal game?
Well, they finally did get the meeting, as you say, Marcel, and what we saw was probably a win for Harper to silence Wynne on her year-long attack that Harper had refused to meet with her. They agreed to disagree on the Ontario pension plan. Harper continues to not want anything to do with Wynne's proposal on that. They discussed the Ring of Fire and infrastructure in Ontario, separate and apart. The Ring of Fire as a one-off, and Ottawa seems slow and loath to do anything on that front. And infrastructure programs, the federal government and Harper would like Ontario to apply for one-off applications and not just have a big pool of infrastructure money for Ontario to play with. And that was really the highlight of the pre-game conversation.
So are we expecting to see another meeting with the Prime Minister and the Premier?
I expect that it will come, but we have an election in the works, and probably not a huge priority for Stephen Harper now that he's muted Premier Wynne. I don't see a pressing need for him to sit down and have another conversation anytime soon.
Well, let's stick to Ottawa. And Finance Minister Joe Oliver dropped a bombshell earlier when he announced that the federal budget is going to be delayed, basically because of the precipitous drop in the price of oil. And so he's now having to rejig his numbers. What impact will that have on Ontario?
Well, I think it will probably give Sousa a little more, Finance Minister Sousa in Ontario, a little more time to come up with his budget. We do remember that our last Ontario budget was quite delayed after the provincial election, so the budget didn't effectively pass until I would say end of June or July. And so I don't think there's a huge pressing need. Ontario can say that we'd like to see the federal budget before they want to release their own. I know PEI has just come out yesterday and said that no, they're plugging ahead with their budget as scheduled. We'll still wait and see what Ontario says, but I expect it too will be quite late from budget.
Now, one of the things that has caused Oliver to change the date is the price of oil, and the economies in Alberta and Newfoundland and other oil-producing provinces are taking a hit, and that's going to potentially put them in a recessionary mode. Premier Wynne has said that Ontario is prepared to step up its game and basically shield the rest of the country by encouraging more manufacturing. Do you see that as happening, and do you see that as having an impact on the provincial economy?
Well, certainly, and that was manufacturing and investment in Ontario manufacturing was on the agenda for the conversation between the Premier and uh, and the Prime Minister. But what will be interesting to see, Ottawa is banking on the fact that the price of oil is going to go back up. That's the delay in budget. They hope that give it a couple more months and the oil prices will be back. And so they're not banking on, I don't think, a a long-term low oil price or a low Canadian dollar. So I don't think you're going to see them really saying that Ontario is going to be our economic uh, powerhouse again. And economists would be better positioned to answer this than me. But
Mhm.
I do suspect that we are going to get an uptick in the manufacturing sector here in Ontario and in Quebec, and that should help shield some of the economic problems that are going to be hitting
Mhm.
the country.
Well, we've now seen the Canadian dollar drop down to around 85 cents, which is what manufacturers were looking for as the sweet spot to encourage more exports to the US and abroad. And hopefully that's going to starting manufacturing that is being pummeled over the years in Ontario. Is there any indication on that?
Well, that and obviously the Bank of Canada's recent reduction in interest rates, I think that caught some people by surprise, and that should get money moving. Ontario has
Hmm.
long been trying to get people who've been sitting on money and businesses that are unwilling to invest and grow. I think this might spur some action in the Sousa budget to really get Ontario businesses some
Hmm.
incentives to grow and expand.
A little closer to home, there's a by-election in Sudbury on February 5th, where the Liberals have been able to persuade the NDP's former federal caucus chair to defect and cross the floor and come over to the Win side. Can you handicap that race in Sudbury?
Wow, we have not seen many by-elections with the stakes this high for party leaders, and it looks like a very close race between the two front runners, being the NDP and the Liberal candidate, who was the former Democrat. And I don't know that I would want to pick a winner right now. If you had me on in a week or two,
Mm-hmm.
just before any day, I might be willing to pick a winner. But it's an incredibly tight race, and like I say, the risks are high for Win. She attracted Glenn Thibault to join the provincial Liberal team, and that is a coup for her, and well done. But if he's not able to hold on to the seat, Kathleen Wynne will not be able to get another high caliber candidate in any of the upcoming by-elections, and none of the books yet, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly some expected. And from the NDP side, Mulcair in Ottawa and Horvath here at Queen's Park certainly have a lot at stake if they lose this seat.
Mm-hmm.
And Sudbury is a hotbed right now of people flying in
Mm-hmm.
to help on this campaign.
I'm told that there's not a hotel room to be found in the vicinity of Sudbury right now. But what about the former Liberal candidate, Andrew Olivier, who came within 1,000 votes of winning that seat and then was denied the nomination and has subsequently released some tapes that he claimed showed that the Liberals were trying to induce him with an offer of a job or a position. And that has triggered a OPP investigation as well as an Elections Ontario investigation. Seems like some sour grapes from the former Liberal candidate.
Well, I know Andrew, and I also a former candidate myself. I know that there are no guarantees and no strings attached when you sign on to be a candidate. So you can't expect to be the candidate next time. And this is indeed politics, and often called a blood sport. So you do need to take your lumps with this game. But I feel bad for the guy, but at the same time, he has touched on a sentiment and a feeling, not just in Sudbury, but a lot of people think that there's something wrong with this process, that he was not allowed to run. And he is going to get a lot of votes in this by election. and will be the wild card. But he's taking votes
And
away from New Democrats and Liberals. So it'll be interesting to predict how he fares. I'm certain he's not going to win, but
mhm.
he is certainly an interesting wild card.
Well, they had a forum poll that was released just a few days ago that indicated that it was neck and neck between the Liberals and the NDP, and Mr. Oliver was nowhere to be found. In fact, I think he was wandering around somewhere with the PC candidate in single digits. The only candidate or party leader who's not going to be affected by this outcome will be the Tories, who are still leaderless at this time.
Well, yes, and but I expect as people in Sudbury start to pay attention as we get closer to by-election day in February, that Andrew's numbers will pop up a little bit. I suspect he'll beat the Conservative candidate,
Mm.
and certainly steal votes away from both the front runners.
Are there any particular issues, hot button issues that you see that are taking place in Sudbury that could be a warning down the road for the government?
Well, electricity issues are always an issue in Northern Ontario, and especially this time of year when hydro bills are coming in, when people are heating their homes. So front and center. And I know there was a debate last night in Sudbury that this was a topic of conversation. So electricity and prices and stability certainly be a top of mind issue at the ballot box.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Craig Hughson from the Aurora Strategy Group was our guest. We'll be back in just a moment. Over the past weeks, Ontario's judicial system has passed down rulings on several workplace deaths. 2 directors of Numex Canada have been given jail time in addition to a $250,000 fine. Hydro One Networks has been fined for an incident that led to the death of a worker at the Hitchinbrook distribution station. And Swing and Scaff has been fined $350,000 for manufacturing and supplying a poorly maintained swing stage platform. The platform collapsed in 2009, sending 4 construction workers plunging 13 floors to their deaths. According to the 2013 Workplace Safety Insurance Board report, more than a quarter of workplace deaths occur in the construction sector. To discuss why this is happening and what we should be doing about this, we are joined by Patrick Dillon, Business Manager of the Provincial Building and Construction Trade Council of Ontario. Are these recent rulings a sign that the judicial system is taking notice of industrial deaths?
I would hope that it's a small indicator that they may. Um, uh, I've had some real issues with the judicial system on the way it's operated in the past, in my view. And it's not just the judicial system, but the whole, I think our general population almost has I don't like to say it that way, but almost a disrespect for the value of lives of construction workers or industrial workers, people that lose their lives in the workplace. There just seems to be almost a disrespect to the value of their life.
Well, every year, or at least last year, we saw, according to the WSIB, 80 people die in industrial workplace deaths, and that a quarter of them are in the construction sector. So are we starting to see an increase in the number of deaths in construction?
I think it's it's trending the wrong way for sure. Just the indicator is that's where we're going, which is pretty alarming for me that represents construction workers in this province. But along that line, I think that there's just a whole range of things that need to happen. It's you point out to make a good point that it looks like it's increased. That's absolutely opposite of what we're looking for, and so
Mhm.
there's lots of work that needs to be done.
One of the areas is that the province has enforcement officials that are supposed to go out into the workplace to check on things. Is there enough enforcement going on in Ontario right now?
I would say we can always use more enforcement. I think the enforcement needs to be more targeted to the areas where the incidents are happening, where people are losing
Hmm.
their lives. But I also think there's a flaw in the system with the enforcement in that the enforcement officers are, in general, are not tradespeople. So they're out in, you got people that have graduated from community
Hmm.
college or whatever with some degree,
Hmm.
and they're out in the construction workforce enforcing something that they really don't understand. And so I think that's one of the flaws in the system that we need to correct, that we should be putting tradespeople out there as the enforcement officers. But there's a problem for the government in doing that in this austerity minded, uh, not just this government, but past governments at all levels. They're talking about austerity, but they're rather, and that's um, puts pressure on their budget, so they can't afford to hire
Hmm.
tradespeople to go out there and do the enforcement. But I think that is one big step that needs to take place.
Well, one of the things that we've seen is that whenever there's a workplace fatality, the government all of a sudden focuses for a week on a blitz on that particular industry. So when the Kipling scaffolding tragedy took place, we then saw a blitz on all scaffolding sites across Ontario, and then for the next 51 weeks, we got hit and miss. And so, is that type of approach going to really solve anything? Doing these
No,
blitzes?
it's. I mean, the blitz is better than nothing. But the fact is that if the blitz is caused by an incident, it's too late. So you have to be proactive with prevention, and I don't think that we are. And I think certainly one of the things that I'd like to chat a little bit about as we go maybe is back to the issue of the respect. It's not just the judicial system, but I think generally in the population that there's less than the correct amount of respect there should be for the lives of workers.
Now, just getting on the issue of safety training, is there enough training going on today to adequately prepare workers for the jobs that they're taking on?
I think there's a gap that there could be more training if it got focused. I mean, if you look at the statistics from the former
Hmm.
WSIB statistics and the Ministry of Labor, their own statistics, you have a general idea where the incidents are taking place, and yet there's not a real focus on those areas. Um, there's always political concern, and
Hmm.
I'd like to park political concern for lives concern for particularly in our in any workplace actually.
Now, do you think that the recent court decisions of, giving fines 250,000, 180,000, 350,000, is that going to send a message to employers to get with the program and make sure that they're providing the safe workplaces that we need to have?
My view of those fines is that they're just a number that the employer has to consider as a cost for doing business, and that is the wrong approach. If the employer clearly understood that if I die in his or her workplace,
Mhm.
that the person that owns that company could be in jail for 6 months, they would have a whole different view as to what goes on in the workplace. Now, I don't want to see employers going to jail. I want to see people living at the end of the day, at the end of their workday.
Mhm. Now, the Ontario government, as a result of the Kipling tragedy, introduced and has established the chief prevention officer. What is his or her role in terms of ensuring a safer workplace?
Well, the new prevention officer, and they set up a prevention council, which I sit on. Um, the job is to oversee safety.
Hmm.
That spun out of the Tony Dean report over
Hmm.
the Kipling Avenue tragedy. The problem with that, I mean, it starts to go in the right direction, but the problem is that uh, to get that report, it had to be a consensus report.
Mm.
And there has never been any substantial improvements in safety by consensus ever in this province. So with the Occupational Health and Safety Act, there was a whole lot of employers weren't cheering that was being brought in. And in '89, Sabera brought in the Bill 208, the right to
Right.
refuse unsafe work. That was like the world was going to come to an end
Hmm.
when that happened, and so that's what we need. We need that kind of leadership, and we talk about this at the Prevention Council now. Is that you got the Dean report with 46 recommendations, and we're moving towards fulfilling those recommendations. But the real job in safety is to get beyond Dean to proactive prevention.
Hmm.
So that's the gap that we're starting to work on. Myself, I think the Prevention Council and the Chief Prevention Officer has an opportunity to move the yardsticks here. But you know yourself, in the bureaucracy of government, it is tough to get things done. So,
So speaking of getting things done, last question. What role can the government do to actually move the stakes forward? You mentioned a couple of things that they've done in the past. What do they need to do for the future?
I think the to help. I think the biggest change that needs to take place in the workplace is that workers, Sabera brought in, I mentioned that the
Hmm.
Bill 208, the right to refuse unsafe work. That really sounds good and was very, very well intended. But workers that raise safety issues in the workplace today are either get laid off on the first layoff, this is in construction,
Right.
or they think they will be so they don't raise safety concerns. So we got a shift that's got to take place with in all workplaces, that workers are actually confident that they can speak up and raise a legitimate safety concern. If we were to accomplish that, that would be the next big major step in accomplishing prevention.
Patrick Dillon, Business Manager of the Provincial Building and Construction Trade Council of Ontario, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, it seems that the Prime Minister has taken to heart my holiday message and stopped acting like a Scrooge and met with Premier Wynne. The short meeting has demonstrated that at least both leaders can be civil and will work together on issues concerning Canada's largest province. With oil revenues shrinking and economists predicting a recession in Alberta, Ontario will need to act as the economic engine for the country and pick up where other provinces are failing. As the federal and provincial governments work on their budgets, they will face many challenges. Will there be tax hikes or cutbacks? Will we see reduced levels of service? And will we put off hard decisions today and borrow against tomorrow? All of these questions will weigh heavy on the finance ministers as they search for solutions that stimulate the economy without inflicting damage. Yet one thing keeps on coming out in study after study. The gap between very rich and everyone else is growing at an alarming rate. If we are to be a truly progressive society, we will need to balance the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest in society. We are seeing that young people don't believe that they will be better off than their parents. Today's generation is the first in the modern age to have higher levels of student debt, poverty, and unemployment than the two generations before them. This means millennials have less money and education and fewer job opportunities than the previous generation. And most importantly, when people don't or can't afford to buy things, that reverberates throughout the economy. We need to find ways to boost incomes, not just shield the wealthy. As the finance ministers look at the options before them, they need to think about ways that will increase incomes for all Canadians. And that's the point. That's all for this edition of The Point. Follow us on Twitter at Watch The Point, like us on Facebook, and check out our podcast at watchthepoint.libsyn.com. Starting on February 11th, watch us on Rogers Cable Channel 10 or 510 in HD. I'm Marcel Wieder. Thank you for joining us.